Cheap junk. That's what my granddaughter said. 2 words that felt like a hammer on bone. She pinched the chain between her fingers like it was a twist tie somebody forgot to throw away, and turned her face to the light of her phone. In the reflection of that glass, I saw my wife's necklace, and I saw myself, 71. Hands that wired half the kitchens in Boston, suddenly treated like a man peddling trinkets. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It was Saturday, October 21st, in my son Evan's townhouse in Jamaica Plain. The Red Sox murmured from the TV like the city's heartbeat, and a sheet cake sagged on paper plates that bent if you breathed on them. I'd wrapped the necklace in one of Maureen's old napkins, the one she embroidered with a crooked little shamrock, the same napkin in the 1991 Thanksgiving Polaroid I still keep in my wallet. I set the package in Maya's hands and told her what it was. Her grandmother's pendant, the chain her great-grandfather bought on Charles Street in 1974. The one I've insured every December since the year we could finally afford to. Maya peeled the napkin back, snapped a selfie with the dining room mirror, and scrunched her nose at the old-style clasp. It's vintage. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, didn't look up from her phone, but I saw the smile she kept for other people's embarrassments. Evan stared at his socks. "Say thank you," he muttered. Maya exhaled through her teeth. "Thanks, Grandpa, but it looks cheap." Something in the room shifted then, the kind of silence you hear when a bus brakes hard, rubber, heat, air swallowed up. I could have laughed it off. I could have given the speech about sentiment and family. Instead, I told her the truth. "Your grandmother wore this to Sunday Mass and to the hospital when you were born. She said it made her brave." Maya shrugged, eyes still on her screen. Sloane drifted into the kitchen. "Who wants more cake?" She sang, like it was a distraction from a fire drill. "I want you to try it on," I said. "Not an order, an invitation." Maya hooked the clasp, held the pendant against her throat, and posed for another picture. "It's pokey," she said, unhooking it the way you'd remove a price tag, and she placed it in my palm with 2 fingers, careful not to touch more than she had to. "Maybe there's like a newer one we could get?" The pendant lay warm and heavy in my hand, heavier than it had any right to be. My thumb found the tiny nick on the lower facet, an imperfection I've always loved, because it proved the stone had lived a little. In my other hand, the house key on my ring cut a half moon in my skin. Evan cleared his throat. "Dad, you don't have to." "I know what I have to do," I said. And I wrapped the necklace back in Maureen's napkin like I was dressing a wound. I drove home to Dorchester in a quiet that felt like snow before it falls. I set the necklace in the bedside box, same place it slept for years, then took out an index card and wrote Oct 21. Maya refused. I underlined the date twice. At 2:13 a.m., a small sound woke me, not in the house, but in me. The click of a lock turning. Memory, patience, and the door between what's given and what's stolen. I lay there and listened to it, and when it stopped, I knew the next thing I'd do would not be about feelings. It would be about proof. Grief doesn't come like a storm. It comes like a fog that knows your furniture better than you do. From Sunday, October 22nd through Tuesday, October 24th, my house moved an inch farther away from me, as if the walls had learned a new language and didn't feel like translating. Sunday morning, I made coffee that tasted like coins. I carried Maureen's necklace to the lamp by the recliner and turned it under the yellow light, stone catching, then losing the glow. The tiny nick on the lower facet winked like it was in on a joke I didn't want to hear. "Sorry, Mo," I whispered. "I did this wrong." I thought of Maya's 2-finger return, how careful she'd been not to touch me. I set the pendant back in the bedside box, closed the lid, and felt for the familiar pencil tick I'd once drawn on the wood to line it up square. Old electrician trick: if something's been off, you can see it by what no longer meets. After lunch, I tried to nap and instead drifted through rooms, touching door frames, straightening the index card I'd written the night before. Oct 21. Maya refused. The underlines looked like train tracks leading nowhere. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the folder marked Maureen. In it was the 1986 safety deposit box receipt, creased along the width, the bank's name embossed in blue. My signature, a younger man's attempt at dignity. I thought about tearing the crease so it would lay flat. Instead, I laid a sheet of wax paper over it like a museum docent, turned on the printer's flatbed light and made a copy. When the copy slid out warm into my hand, I took a pen and underlined the date there instead. Paper remembers in ways the heart forgets. On Monday, October 23rd, I went to St. Bridget's after breakfast. The sanctuary smelled like wood polish and candle smoke. Father O'Rourke isn't a tall man, but he has a way of making a room stand up straighter. "Hal," he said, soft but not sorry. We sat in the front pew. "Do you remember the pendant?" I asked, as if I hadn't rehearsed the question 100 times walking over. He did. "Your Maureen wore it the day you brought me the lease to bless," he said. "Said it was her little courage stone from her father." I swallowed. "I gave it to Maya last night," I said. "She called it cheap." He held that word in the air like a coin you're deciding whether to keep. "Memory is a contract, Hal," he said finally. "It's better when signed by two people, but one signature can hold if the witness is strong. I don't cry in front of men often. I did that day." He put a hand on my shoulder, not to shush me, just to say I was still here. "Bring me whatever you have," he added. "Paper steadies people." I walked home slower than I'd walked there. The city had a late October bite, wind sneaking down the back of my collar in little cold fingers. In my kitchen, I made another copy of the 1986 receipt, then a copy of the 1991 Thanksgiving Polaroid. Maureen, at the head of our table in the old triple-decker, her pendant bright as a lum under a cheap ceiling light. I slid the copies into the Maureen folder and clipped the originals together with a stainless binder clip. It felt like armor. That night I couldn't sleep. The clock read 2:17 a.m., then 3:03, then 4:22. I listened the way a man listens after a break-in on the block, except there hadn't been one. There was just a sound behind the sound, the memory of a key turning somewhere that wasn't my door. On Tuesday, October 24th at 10:12 a.m., my phone rang. Evan. I let it buzz one extra time and answered. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice already apologizing. "About the other night. Sloan says we should have thanked you more," Sloan says. "It's not about thanks," I said. "It's about what you teach a girl to keep." He cleared his throat. "Well, Sloan looked online and, tarnish can mean it's not real gold. Maybe it's a costume?" He turned the last word into a question, like he was asking the weather for permission. I looked at the pencil tick on my bedside box. I could feel its location in my fingertips. "I've insured that necklace every December since '84, I said. "We'll let the paper answer before the internet does." He tried to laugh. Right. Hey, random question. Do you still want me to hold on to that spare key? It's probably somewhere in the junk drawer. I pictured the drawer. Batteries, rubber bands, take-out menus, a screwdriver that's the wrong size for everything. And somewhere under it all, a key I handed him when Maya was born in 2010. "Evan," I said, keeping my voice level, "I want you to find it." He said the two words that stopped the heart as surely as a fist. "I'll look later." Later is a whole coin's fall through. "Today," I said, and surprised myself with the edge. "Please." We hung up after a few more soft excuses. I set the phone on the table like it might bruise and stared at the calendar magnet on my fridge, little boxes waiting to be given a job. "Paper steadies people," Father had said. I took out a notebook and gave the boxes work. I drew a line and titled it Plan. Under it, Proof First. I wrote Nov 1, call Gloria Chen, appraisal. Nov 3, appointment 10:30 a.m. Bring thermos. Carry a napkin inside. I wrote Ruth and circled it. Ask for door cam copies. I wrote bank. Ask for view-only alerts. I wrote locks. Inventory keys. Consider rekey. Every item got an empty square beside it, a promise to make a mark later that wasn't an underline of regret. Before dinner, I laid the necklace on a towel and took close photos of the stone and clasp with my old flip phone, the kind of pictures you keep for yourself, not to post. I printed the best one on my wheezing home printer and slid it behind the Polaroid in the folder. The printer hiccuped, spit a second copy by accident. I didn't throw it away. Paper steadies, people. I slipped the extra copy beneath the phone bill and wrote the date on the corner in pencil, Oct 24. Evening settled like a coat. I didn't turn on the TV. I reheated leftover stew and ate it at the counter, the house quiet enough that my spoon sounded like a clock. I thought about the two worlds my granddaughter was learning to live between. The one where a thing's value comes from strangers' comments, and the one where it comes from a woman's hands and a man's pay stub. I decided that if there was going to be a lesson, it would be taught by receipts, not reproaches. At 9:05 p.m., I opened the bedside box and touched the chain once, as if I were taking a pulse. I aligned the lid to the pencil tick and pressed my thumb to the wood for a count of 3. "Tomorrow we start," I said to the room, to Maureen, to the part of myself that refuses to be talked out of the life he earned. Then I set the Maureen folder in my briefcase, laid my index card on top, and sharpened a pencil until the shavings curled like ribbon. I went to bed, knowing exactly what I was going to do on Wednesday, November Vern, and exactly why there'd be a second signature on it. Even if the witness had to be paper, by the time November arrived, my grief had grown teeth. It didn't cry anymore, it calculated. I woke up on Wednesday, November 1st, with a new kind of energy, the kind that comes after you've accepted you're the only adult left in the room. The air in Dorchester had that sharp Boston bite, the kind that used to make Maureen pull her scarf twice around her neck and say, "It's honest cold, it doesn't lie." I made a checklist on a yellow pad. Before the sun was fully up, verify the necklace is real. Value, tighten every lock, literal and legal. Watch who gets nervous. First, at 9:07 a.m., I called Gloria Chen, an independent jeweler in Cambridge. I'd known her shop since my apprentice days. Small window, old fixtures, the smell of polish and purpose. Her assistant booked me for Friday, November 3rd, 10:30 a.m. I told her I'd be carrying something valuable but delicate. She told me to wrap it in love, not bubble wrap. When I hung up, I took the necklace out of the box again. I didn't use Maureen's napkin this time. I slipped it inside my old Stanley thermos, padding it with a strip of cotton. I snapped the lid shut. To anyone watching, it would look like an old man taking lunch to work. That afternoon, I stopped by Ruth Delgado's house, the retired schoolteacher next door with the door camera that catches half my driveway. We shared tea in her cluttered kitchen. The walls were lined with framed student photos and owl figurines. "Ruth," I asked casually, "do you ever check your camera footage?" She laughed. "Only when raccoons get brave. Why?" I told her someone had been idling in front of my house late at night. Her face tightened. "That green SUV again?" she said. "Been there a few times around 11. She handed me an SD card she'd already backed up just in case. I thanked her, labeled it NOV3, SD received, and slipped it into a small Ziploc. That night, I made a folder on my desk labeled Proofs. Inside went the copy of the 1986 safety deposit receipt, the 1991 Polaroid, and now the SD card. I didn't know yet what exactly I'd catch, but I knew something was coming. Friday, November 3rd. The city was cold enough to turn breath into fog ribbons. I took the red line to Porter Square, thermos tucked under my arm. Gloria's shop looked exactly as I remembered. Brass bells on the door, velvet trays lit from above. Gloria examined the necklace under a loupe, her eyes narrowing the way a carpenter inspects a joint. "This isn't costume," she said. "The chain's mid-century solid, the pendant's older, late Victorian, maybe 1890s. The flaw on the lower facet? That's what proves authenticity." I watched her type the report. When she turned the screen toward me, the number caught my breath. $14,500 stated value. She printed and signed the appraisal with a blue pen, embossed it, and handed it to me with a polite smile. "That's love work, not market work," she said. I paid $45 for the written report and bought a $6 clamshell case so I could finally stop wrapping it in Maureen's napkin. I walked out lighter than I'd walked in, but the feeling didn't last. On the train home, I kept thinking of Sloane's smirk and how quick she'd been to Google the word tarnish. That evening, I went through the SD card from Ruth's camera. At 11:43 p.m., headlights glided across my driveway, pausing. The shape of Evan's old Camry. A silhouette leaned out, a woman's frame, phone in hand. I paused the footage. The jacket shimmered green under the streetlight. Sloane's winter puffer. I noted the time, printed a still, and slipped it into the proofs folder. Saturday, November 4th, I called my bank. The young man on the line had a polite, clipped voice. "Mr. McKenna, we can set up view-only alerts on your accounts," he explained. "So you'll get notified if anyone initiates large transactions." I told him I didn't want to freeze Maya's college fund, only monitor the flow. He guided me through the setup, and by the time we hung up, I'd added my secondary email for direct alerts. "People don't expect paper anymore," I muttered after the call. "That's why it still works." That night, I drafted 6 envelopes addressed to myself. Certified mail. It's a trick I learned in the union days. If you ever need to prove when a document existed, you mail it to yourself sealed and never open it. Postmarks don't lie. I labeled them AF. Ready for future evidence. A. Appraisal copy. B. Key inventory. C. Bank communications. D. Camera stills. E. Family correspondence. F. Final report. They sat in a neat stack on my desk like loaded rounds waiting for their day. On Sunday, November 5th, I took a long walk past Jamaica Pond. Leaves crusted the path like copper coins. I thought about Maureen, how she'd have handled this. She'd have said, "Hal, let them show you who they are. Then believe them." And she'd have smiled that tiny smile that made me want to fix every broken thing in sight. When I got home, I took out the necklace, now resting in its clear plastic case. I turned it over once, twice. "We're going to tell the truth," I said aloud. Then, because I'm a man who likes structure, I wrote another index card and dated it. Nov 5, Maureen's proof secured. Gloria's report in hand. SD card from Ruth. I pinned it inside the proofs folder like a heartbeat. That night, for the first time since Maya's insult, I slept without waking. The fog had lifted. What replaced it wasn't peace, it was precision. Next stop, a test. A small, careful one. Something that would tell me exactly who was hungry enough to take another bite. A plan, my father used to say, is just anger with a deadline. By the time November 7th rolled around, I had both. I started the day like any other. Oatmeal. 1 egg, the paper folded to the crossword. But my pencil wasn't circling clues. It was checking boxes from my yellow pad. First order of business. Create proof of temptation. I opened the bedside box where the necklace slept. Before touching it, I lined up the pencil tick I'd made against the lid, making sure it still met perfectly. Then with tweezers, I lifted the chain and replaced its clasp with a $12 replica I'd bought years ago for a small repair that never happened. The difference was microscopic, the kind only a jeweler or a guilty conscience would notice. I took a photo with my flip phone. Lid open, pendant glinting, timestamp glowing faintly on the screen. Then I shut the box, aligned the tick again, and made a mental note. If that mark shifted even a hair, I'd know someone had come fishing. At 9:30 a.m., I walked to the post office and mailed one of my certified envelopes, the one labeled A, appraisal copy, to myself. The clerk stamped it, slid it into the bin, and didn't know he'd just notarized my first move in a family chess game. By November 8th, the Boston wind had teeth. I spent the morning on the porch, sipping coffee from the same Stanley thermos that had carried the necklace days earlier. Across the street, Ruth's curtains fluttered. She texted me late the night before, that green SUV again. 11:20 p.m., stayed a while, I didn't reply. I just smiled. Sometimes you have to let curiosity believe it's safe before you trap it. That afternoon, I stopped by South Street Pawn, a squat little shop squeezed between a vape store and a laundromat. The bell on the door jangled like a guilty laugh. Behind the counter, a tall kid with a name tag reading Deshawn looked up. "Got any Victorian pieces lately?" I asked, pretending to browse the cases of tarnished rings. He leaned forward. "Maybe, why you ask?" I shrugged. Just had one appraised. My wife's old pendant. Thought I might compare craftsmanship. He chuckled. A lady came in Monday, tried to sell something like that. Green jacket, said she'd got it off her old man. Offered $600, but when I asked for ID, she split. I whistled low. No kidding. What day was that? Think the 8th. He glanced at his ledger where Nov 8 was scrawled in red. Yeah, that one. He scribbled me a pawn inquiry slip, a generic form but dated and initialed. I bought a $10 silver-plated trinket just to keep him friendly and tucked the slip into my pocket. On the walk home, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. But the pattern was writing itself. Insult, opportunity, attempt. That night I checked the pencil tick again. It had shifted. Barely, maybe a hair's width, but enough to break the line. November 9th, I texted Evan and invited them all for Thanksgiving dinner at my place, Nov 24, 4 p.m. I wrote, mac and cheese for Maya, sweet potatoes for you. He replied with a thumbs up. Sloane replied an hour later, we'll see. Half an hour after that, her social media updated. A picture of her at a boutique counter captioned, treasure hunting before the holidays. I took a screenshot, time-stamped 11:14 a.m., and printed it for the folder. On November 10th, I called Gloria Chen again. I asked her, in the most casual tone I could muster, if someone swapped a clasp on a pendant like mine, could it fool an untrained eye? She laughed softly. It'll fool greed, not knowledge, I smiled. That's all I needed to know. By November 11th, I had my system locked. Every copy, every receipt, every envelope accounted for. The only thing missing was patience. So I gave myself a small test. I left the box visible on the nightstand. When Evan dropped by that weekend, the lid barely cracked open, the necklace peeking out like a secret half-told. He noticed it, of course. You still got that thing? He asked, reaching toward it. Still, I said quietly. Always. He withdrew his hand. Sloane said maybe you'd want to put it in storage. Safer that way. I already have storage, I said, and closed the lid. On November 12th at 3:40 p.m., I slid Ruth's new SD card into my laptop. There it was, a green puffer jacket, Evan's old Camry, my driveway. The timestamp read, Nov 10:11:28 p.m. The figure lingered by my porch light, looked toward the door, then ducked away. I printed the still, labeled it in pen, 11:28 p.m., entry attempt. It joined the pawn slip, the screenshot, and the appraisal copy in my expanding proofs folder. Later that night, I sat in bed staring at the pencil tick, that faint scar of graphite now slightly blurred. I thought of Maureen, her laugh, her hands, her way of saying, Hal, never shout. Just show. So that's what I do. I didn't need to accuse anyone. I didn't even need to raise my voice. I just needed to show, with receipts, with witnesses, and with timing sharp enough to cut through denial. Thanksgiving was set. The trap was quiet, clean, and lawful. All I had to do now was wait for greed to open its mouth wide enough to swallow its own reflection, and when it did, I'd be ready, with proof in hand and a smile that said, paper never forgets. By the time November 15th came around, Boston's cold had changed character. It wasn't the playful chill that nipped your fingers. It had that straight-down-your-spine kind of bite, the kind that makes you seal windows twice. I spent the morning watching frost gather on the porch railing while waiting for locksmith Serrano. He arrived at 9:22 a.m., a short man with calm eyes and hands that didn't waste movement. He swapped out the locks on both doors, sliding new Schlager cylinders in with mechanical precision. I watched every screw turn, every click, until he handed me 3 labeled keys in a tiny brown envelope. 2 for you, 1 backup, he said. I made him write 3 keys total on the invoice and sign it. I paid him 100 dinars, cash, and tipped 10. Before he left, I said, these locks keep out more than thieves. He gave me the kind of look mechanics give when they know there's a story but won't ask. That afternoon, I mailed 2 certified letters, 1 to Evan, 1 to Sloane, politely stating that, for routine security reasons, the house locks have been updated. It was phrased so mildly it almost sounded like a neighborhood bulletin, but I knew what it was, a shot across the bow, At 6 p.m., Evan showed up alone, face red from the wind, breath steaming. Sloane stayed in the car, her silhouette visible through the frosted windshield. "Dad," he said, not sitting down, "what's with the letters?" "You could have just called." "I like paper," I said, pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "Paper remembers better than people," he sighed. "Sloane thinks you're overreacting. About the necklace, the locks, all of it. She says you're letting grief turn into paranoia." I handed him the 1986 bank receipt, the fresh appraisal, and the photo of Maureen wearing the pendant. "This is grief doing its homework," I said. He skimmed the appraisal, his eyes catching the number of $4,500, then flicking toward the door. "She just didn't want Maya disappointed if it turned out to be costume jewelry," he said softly. "And the pawn shop offer of $600? That was for a costume piece too." He froze. "What pawn shop?" I played the flip phone recording I'd made days ago, his own voice saying, "I'll look later." The tone of a man who didn't want to know what he'd find. He rubbed his forehead. "Dad, maybe Sloane cleaned the drawers. Maybe the spare key's just gone." "Gone?" I said quietly. "Gone isn't a direction, son. It's an outcome." He looked smaller after that. I didn't press. When he left, he didn't take coffee, just muttered that Sloane would calm down once things settled. The car idled too long outside before pulling away. On November 19th, Ruth texted me a clip from her door camera, 11:58 p.m. A figure in a green puffer jacket trying the back door key, jiggling it twice, then stepping back and making a call. Through the faint crackle of winter air, I could hear a laugh. A woman's. I didn't need subtitles. I paused the video and printed the still. In it, the porch light cast a halo over the intruder's hands, gloved but small and a woman's size. I slipped the print into the proofs folder behind the Polaroid of Maureen. I liked the symbolism, my wife's calm gaze above the evidence of deceit. The next day, November 20th, I took the appraisal, the pawn slip, and the door cam stills to Father O'Rourke. We sat in the rectory office, surrounded by the faint smell of incense and polish. He flipped through each page slowly. "You're building a case," he said. "I'm building a truth," I replied. He smiled sadly. "Same thing in your hands." By November 22nd, I was ready to tighten the net. I dropped by Gloria Chen's shop again. Hypothetically, I asked, if someone switched a clasp to make a piece look cheaper, could it fool a pawn dealer? "Every time," she said, "unless the dealer's trained." "Why?" I smiled. "Just making sure I'm not crazy." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not crazy, Mr. McKenna. You're careful." Before leaving, I asked her for a duplicate of the appraisal, stamped again. She obliged. I paid another $10 for the copy, thanked her, and walked out into the biting cold. November 23rd, Thanksgiving Eve. I cleaned the house like I was expecting royalty. Every counter wiped, every photo frame dusted. I set Maureen's embroidered napkin in the center of the table and laid the velvet pouch on top of it, the necklace tucked inside, looking harmless and loved. Beside it, a tiny pen camera disguised as a ballpoint pointed toward the hutch mirror. I cooked all afternoon. Turkey, stuffing, and Maya's favorite mac and cheese, because that's what she'd remember. While stirring, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. My hair looked whiter than it had a month ago, but my eyes, they had purpose again. At 8:14 p.m., I sat at the table and rehearsed what I'd say if things turned ugly. "This isn't about jewelry," I whispered to the empty chairs. "It's about what kind of people we're raising." Outside, I saw headlights slow in front of Ruth's house. The same green SUV. It lingered, then rolled off into the night. I went to bed early, knowing that by the next evening, the truth would walk right through my front door, and that this time I'd have an audience, a camera, and the kind of patience Maureen would have called holy. Thanksgiving Day came in gray and slow, the kind of morning where the sky feels made of tin. I was up by 7:15 a.m., basting the turkey and listening to WBZ News just for background noise. Every few minutes I glanced at the hutch, the velvet pouch sitting in plain sight. Inside was the dummy clasp necklace waiting like bait. The little pen camera blinked once every 10 seconds. Its light too faint for anyone to notice unless they were guilty enough to look for it. By 3:45 p.m., The house smelled like nutmeg, butter, and nerves. The table gleamed. Maureen's embroidered napkin sat under the pouch like an old witness ready to testify. I poured cider into crystal glasses, one for each of them, though I already knew some cups wouldn't be raised in gratitude. The first knock came at 4:10. Evan and Maya stood on the porch. Both smiled a little too wide. Maya's hair was pinned back with silver clips, her jacket shiny new. Behind them, Sloane stepped from the green SUV, in coat glossy, face glowing, with the kind of practice warmth that doesn't thaw anything. "Dad," Evan said, shaking snow off his sleeves, "you really went all out." "I like my traditions," I told him, and I meant it. Inside, the house felt smaller once their voices filled it. Sloane moved first, circling the dining table like a realtor assessing value. "You cleaned up," she said, scanning the hutch. "Looks nice." Her eyes flicked to the velvet pouch, then away too quickly. "We said grace." I mentioned Maureen by name. Sloane interrupted, smiling. "Let's not dwell in the past, Hal. She'd want everyone happy." "Happy," I echoed. "That's one word for it." Maya looked between us. "Grandpa, did you bring the necklace?" "It's right there," I said, nodding toward the hutch. She crossed over, lifted the velvet pouch, and drew out the pendant. It caught the light like truth itself. She hesitated, thumb tracing the tiny flaw on the stone. "Still looks old," she murmured, but not cruelly this time. "That's because it's older than all of us put together," I said gently. I poured the cider, watching reflections ripple across the glasses. "Before we eat, let's toast to what lasts, honesty, family, and things worth keeping." Sloane smiled thinly, blinking her glass against Evan's. "To family," she said with all the conviction of a sales pitch. I let the silence hang, then added, "and to truth." As we sat, the oven timer dinged. I rose to fetch the sweet potatoes. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Sloane's phone tilted beneath the table. The screen's faint glow reflected in her glass. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. When dessert came, pumpkin pie and mac and cheese for Maya, I reached under the sideboard and pulled out 3 small envelopes. "Maya," I said, handing her the first, "this one's for you. Donations made in your grandmother's name, $2,800 total, to your school's arts fund." I thought she'd like that better than flowers. Her mouth opened a little. "Wow, Grandpa." Sloane's smile vanished like steam. "That's thoughtful," she said. "So no jewelry gifts this year." I folded my hands. "Not today. Gifts have timing, and so does trust." Evan shifted in his chair. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I said evenly, "that the house locks were changed last week." He blinked. "Why?" I slid the locksmith Serrano invoice across the table. 3 keys issued. 2 with me, 1 in my safe. All others invalidated as of November 15th. Sloane's fork paused mid-air. "You're being paranoid?" "Careful," I corrected. "Paranoia is when you fear without proof. I just prefer mine on paper." Maya looked from her parents to me. "Are you guys fighting about me?" "Not at all," I said softly. "We're talking about what things are worth. Some see value in money. Some see it in memory. Some try to pawn it for $600. Sloane's head snapped up. "Excuse me." I met her eyes. Excused. The air shifted. Even the furnace seemed to wait. She stood abruptly, setting her fork down too hard. "I think we should go." "You should finish dessert first," I said, calm as glass. "I insist." For a moment no one breathed. Then Evan murmured, "Hal, Dad, what's this about?" "Proof," I said, "and patience." I leaned back, took a slow sip of cider, and smiled in a way Maureen would have recognized. Quiet, deliberate, final. They didn't know it, but every word, every sideways glance, every flicker of guilt was being caught by that tiny pen camera nestled near the hutch mirror. The whole charade, my generosity, their denial, was the setup. The real reveal was waiting in the folder in my briefcase, along with the photos, the appraisal, and the pawn slip dated November 8th. For now, I let them think the storm had passed. I served coffee, offered seconds of pie, and when Evan said, "This was nice, Dad," I smiled. "Yes," I said. This was the calm before it gets better. When the door finally closed behind them, the house exhaled. I sat there a long while, watching the penlight blink one last time. Tomorrow, I'd pull the footage, print stills, and call it what it was. Evidence. They thought they'd survived Thanksgiving. They didn't realize it was just intermission. I didn't sleep that night. The kind of quiet that follows deceit doesn't let you rest. It hums under your ribs. I brewed coffee at 2 a.m., sat at the kitchen table, and watched the pen camera footage play on my laptop. Every frame was clear. Sloane's sideways glances, the hidden phone angled at the appraisal tucked inside the cookbook slit, Evan's helpless fidgeting, Maya's uncertain eyes. I paused on one still, Sloane smirking as she snapped a photo of the appraisal number. 14,500, her eyes weren't admiring it. They were calculating it. I printed it, dated it Novi 24, and placed it at the front of the proofs folder. By morning, I'd already decided how it would end. No shouting, no fists, just truth, unveiled as publicly as their greed. I made a list on the back of my grocery receipt folder with originals and copies, Polaroid, bank receipt, pawn slip, locksmith invoice, flip phone with voice memo, backup SD card from Ruth's camera, 2 witnesses, 1 moral, 1 legal, Father O'Rourke and Gloria Chen, a dinner table. Same setting, same players. December 22 would be my final stage. But first, I had to deliver Act 1 of The Reckoning, the immediate fallout. On December 1st, Evan called. His voice trembled like a man rehearsing calm. "Dad, about Thanksgiving." Sloane felt ambushed. "She thinks you're holding grudges." "Grudges?" I repeated. "Son, grudges rot people. Documentation doesn't," he sighed. "Can we just talk this through privately?" "She's upset. She should be," I said. "It's uncomfortable when the lights come on." He hung up with a muttered, "Whatever you're planning, just don't make it worse." But worse had already been made. I was just cleaning up. 2 days later, Ruth caught me on the porch. "That car's been gone since Thanksgiving night," she said. "But if you need another copy of the footage, I've saved it. Keep it safe," I told her. It's not over. That afternoon, I visited Father O'Rourke. His office smelled like old paper and lemon oil. I laid the folder on his desk. "I need someone to witness a transfer of trust," I said. He adjusted his glasses, skimmed through the contents. The Polaroid of Maureen in 1991, the 1986 deposit slip, the pawn inquiry dated Nov 8, the locksmith invoice with old keys invalidated scrawled on it. "Hal," he said quietly, "you've done this clean. I can stand by it." Then I stopped by Gloria Chen's shop. She smiled knowingly when she saw the folder. "You're not here for a reappraisal, are you?" "No," I said, "for a testimony." She nodded. "I'll bring the original report. We'll make it official." Everything was lined up. Evidence, witnesses, conscience. The holiday dinner fell on Friday, December 22nd. Same table, same napkin, same hutch. I invited them all again. Evan, Sloane, and Maya, under the guise of making peace. They arrived at 6:15 p.m. Snow flurried outside, thick as dust on memory. The fire crackled low. Sloane came in smiling, cheeks bright. "I'm glad we're doing this again," she said, tone dripping with performance. "I am too," I said. "It's always good to finish what we start." We ate mostly in silence. Maya pushed cranberries around her plate. Evan drank too much cider. I waited until plates were half empty before standing. "I'd like family for this," I said, pulling a folder from the drawer. The pen camera blinked once, its light disguised as the twinkle from the tree. Sloane's smile faltered. "What's that?" "Truth," I said simply. "Paper truth." I opened the folder, laying out each document carefully like cards, in a deck of honesty. First came the Polaroid of Maureen wearing the necklace at Thanksgiving 1991. Maureen's face, calm, radiant, undeniable. Then the 1986 bank receipt, showing the itemized list and my signature. Then Ruth's doorcam still, time-stamped Nov 10/11/28 p.m., showing a green puffer jacket near my back door. Then the appraisal, signed and sealed, $14,500 in black ink. Evan's face drained of color. Maya's lips parted. Sloane's hand twitched toward her phone. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. "You're turning a family dinner into an interrogation." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm turning a lie into a record." I clicked play on my flip phone. The audio filled the room. Sloane's own voice, caught on Nov 19, whispering through a call, "Try the back first." He slowed to change locks. The air froze. Maya's hand shot to her mouth. Evan whispered, "Sloane." "What the hell is that?" She stood abruptly. "You're out of your mind, Hal. You recorded me?" "No," I said evenly. "My neighbor did. I just asked her to check her camera." I slid one final paper forward. The pawn inquiry slip dated Nov 8, Deshawn's initials visible at the bottom. "That's what your plan was worth," I said quietly. $600. Sloane lunged for the papers, but Evan caught her wrist. "Don't," he said. "He's got everything documented," her voice cracked. "This is entrapment." I shook my head. "This is Thanksgiving Part 2. The honest version?" Maya looked at me, eyes wet. "Grandpa, did Mom really?" I stopped her gently. "Sweetheart, people make mistakes. But mistakes don't erase truth." I turned to Evan. "The necklace will stay locked with Gloria Chen, held in trust until Maya turns 21. Gloria has the paperwork. Father O'Rourke will witness. You'll receive copies of everything after tonight." Evan rubbed his forehead, the weight of understanding finally settling. "Dad, I'm sorry." "I know," I said softly. "You just looked away when she acted. You thought silence made you neutral. It didn't." Sloane yanked her coat from the chair. "You're all insane," she spat. "Keep your stupid heirloom." "It's not the heirloom I'm keeping," I said quietly. "It's the lesson." She stormed out into the snow, slamming the door. The house shook once, then fell into a silence so sharp you could hear the tick of the heating pipes. Maya began to cry. I reached across the table, laid a hand on hers. "It's all right. Truth doesn't hurt good people forever, only long enough to make them honest." Evan looked at the pile of papers, the Polaroid, the receipts, the still photo, the appraisal, all the proof of what I'd carried, loved, and defended. "What happens now?" he asked. I handed him a folded note I'd written the night before. On it, "Family meeting, Deck 5, Bank of Boston. Bring ID." He read it and nodded, tears finally breaking. The pen camera blinked one last time, capturing the quiet aftermath, my son's bowed head, my granddaughter's trembling shoulders, and the faint reflection of Maureen's smile from the old photo frame above the hutch. That was my justice, not revenge, not cruelty, just order restored, love protected by paper and patience. Outside, snow began to fall heavier. I closed the folder and whispered, "It's done, Mo. They won't touch it again." But the night wasn't over, because justice, like dinner, always leaves leftovers, and I had one more plate to serve. The morning after the dinner, I woke up to the kind of stillness that only comes when something heavy has finally dropped. No cars, no wind, just a quiet that felt earned. The Jew folder from the night before sat on my desk, papers squared like soldiers after a war. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. I was ready to act. December 5th at 9 a.m. Evan and I met at the Bank of Boston downtown branch. The teller recognized me. Same one who'd handled my account for years. "Morning, Mr. McKenna," she said, polite but wary, as though she could feel the electricity of something about to be settled. I handed her the pay beneficiary form I'd filled out the night before. "I'd like to separate the jewelry rider and reassign the custodian," I said. "Name on it should be Gloria Chen, not Evan McKenna." Evan sat beside me, silent, staring at the papers like they were evidence of a crime, and maybe they were, just not mine. The Shein manager, a man named Ortiz, came out from his office. He'd dealt with me during Maureen's estate paperwork years ago. "Hal," he said gently, "you're freezing disbursements?" "Just the discretionary ones," I said. "College fund for Maya stays untouched. But anything tied to valuables or estate items needs my signature in person." He nodded, stamped a few forms, and passed them across the counter. I signed each page with a steady hand. I could feel Evan's eyes on me the whole time. When we finished, Ortiz shook my hand. "Everything's view only now. No withdrawals, no insurance riders, no transfers without you here. You did the right thing. Outside, the air had that early December bite. Evan finally spoke. You didn't have to do all this. I did, I said. It's not punishment, son, it's protection. There's a difference, he didn't argue. He just nodded and stared down at the sidewalk, his breath fogging the air. That same afternoon, I stopped by South Street Pawn. Deshawn grinned when he saw me. Hey, Mr. McKenna, got your note. Guess what? Your lady in the green jacket came back. I raised an eyebrow. She did? Yeah, a couple days after Thanksgiving. Nov 27 Prey. Tried to sell that same pendant again, but I told her the boss wanted ID this time. She left fast, I smiled. Good instincts. He scribbled me a written statement, signed and dated, confirming the interaction. Another layer of protection. Another receipt for the ledger. 2 days later, Deck 8G, I met Gloria Chen and Zay Father O'Rourke at her jewelry shop. The lights were low, the air smelling faintly of polish and peppermint tea. On the counter sat a small, safe deposit bag, unmarked except for my initials. We'll store it here, Gloria said. Dual signatures for access, mine and yours. Maya can claim it at 21, not a day sooner, Father O'Rourke nodded solemnly. I'll sign as witness. I signed the e-custodial agreement, date and time logged. Deck 8, 2:17 p.m. Gloria took a quick photo of us with her shop phone, proof of the handover. The final step in making Maureen's legacy untouchable. You sure about this? She asked as she placed the necklace in the safe. Absolutely, I said. This isn't about trust anymore. It's about structure. When she turned the key, I felt something click in my chest too. Not the sound of loss this time, the sound of security. A week later, on Deck 12, I called Maya and asked if she wanted hot chocolate after school. She said yes, voice small but clear. We met at the little cafe near the tea station, the same one Maureen used to love. She looked nervous, unsure of the script. Grandpa, she said finally, I was awful to you. I shook my head. You were a kid following examples that didn't deserve following. She blinked, eyes glassy. Did Mom really try to sell it? I didn't lie. She did. But that's not the whole story. Sometimes people get greedy because they're scared. Scared of not having enough. Scared of being less than others. It's no excuse, but it's human. She nodded slowly. You're still giving it to me when I'm older? Yes, I said. When you're old enough to know what value actually means. She smiled for the first time that afternoon. Can I see Grandma's old photos again? We sat at the kitchen table later, flipping through the album. Maureen in her wedding dress, at the Cape with her hair whipping across her face. That 91 Thanksgiving photo, where the pendant gleamed just beneath her collarbone. Maya touched the picture. She's beautiful, she whispered. She still is, I said quietly. In every promise kept. Justice doesn't always wear a robe or hold a gavel. Sometimes it's a folder of receipts, a steady voice, and a boundary no one can cross again. That night, I filed everything neatly. Bank freeze notice, pawnshop letter, Gloria's signed custody form, Maya's hot chocolate receipt. Every piece dated, sealed, and real. When I closed the drawer, I whispered, "It's settled, Mo." Because it was. The legacy was safe. The liar was exposed, and the lesson, like the necklace, was locked where no thief could reach it again. By mid-December, the cold had thickened into something permanent. Boston had that pewter look, streets glistening with frost, rooftops crusted like sugar. I moved slower these days, not from age but from peace. It was the first time in months I didn't wake to the feeling that something was being taken from me. The house felt lighter, the air less guarded. I started my mornings by the window, coffee steaming, a pen in my hand. Every time the pen moved, I felt Maureen near. Her handwriting was always cleaner than mine, neat loops, no wasted ink. I tried to match her steadiness as I wrote her name on a new folder, Legacy Secured. Inside, I placed copies of the custodial agreement, Gloria's signed note, and a printed photo of Maya and me from the cafe. Her hot chocolate had whipped cream piled high, and she was laughing, really laughing, for the first time since the storm broke. The noise in my life had quieted to simple things. The kettle whistle, The squeak of the floor near the hallway. The click of the heater at night. The house used to sound like loneliness. Now it sounded like belonging. I hung Maureen's old Christmas stocking on the fireplace, a faded red one with her initials stitched in white thread, and tucked inside it a copy of the charity receipt. The same one from Thanksgiving. $2,800 donated to Maya's school art program. Maureen had believed in giving before taking, in doing something good quietly. She would have liked that gesture more than any revenge I could have orchestrated. Every day, I found myself reflecting on one word: cheap. It had started all of this. That tiny word, thrown by a teenager who didn't know its weight, had cut deeper than I admitted. But now I understood something Maureen used to say when we were young. Cheap isn't about price, Hal. It's about intention. Cheap is taking without asking. Cheap is mocking what you don't understand. Cheap is calling love worthless because it doesn't sparkle under a filter. I called Ruth one afternoon to thank her for her help. She came over with oatmeal cookies and insisted we eat them before dinner. "You did good, Hal," she said between bites. "You handled it like a gentleman. That's rarer than gold these days." "I didn't want to ruin them," I said honestly. "Just teach them," she smiled. "Teaching's slower than punishing, but it lasts longer." After she left, I packed a small tin of butter cookies for Gloria Chen and added a note. "You saved more than metal." For Father O'Rourke, I sent a thank you card with the verse he'd once quoted to me, "The truth shall make you free." And for Frank Russo, my old union buddy, I left a voicemail. "Frank, don't ever throw out your receipts. They're the closest thing to confessions some people ever give." On December 18th, I wrote Maya a letter. I told her about the winter of 1975, our first Christmas in Boston. Maureen and I couldn't afford a tree that year, so we found one on a street corner, a lopsided pine someone had left behind. We bought it for $1, carried it home, and strung popcorn around it until our fingers were raw. We laughed like fools. That was our first holiday miracle. Inside the envelope, I placed a copy of the 1991 Polaroid, the one with Maureen wearing the necklace, and a small note. "Love doesn't rust. It just waits to be cleaned." I kept the original in the proofs folder, where it belonged. Not because I didn't trust Maya, but because legacies deserve anchors. I wasn't sentimental, I was precise. That's how I'd loved Maureen. That's how I'd protected her memory. As the days shortened, I found myself smiling at small things. The kettle's hum, the old photo on the mantel, the hum of the refrigerator that always sounded like quiet applause. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the order I'd rebuilt. One receipt, one truth, one locked safe at a time. The necklace, for all its beauty, was just metal and stone. But the story around it, the protection, the patience, the proof, was the real heirloom. Justice, I realized, wasn't about taking something back. It was about never letting the wrong hands touch it again, and that's what I'd done when I turned off the light that night. The house exhaled with me, finally, completely, at peace. December 23rd arrived quiet, the kind of winter day that felt wrapped in glass. Frost feathered the windows, the morning light thin and grey. I was finishing my second cup of coffee when a knock came, a slow, uncertain rhythm. When I opened the door, Evan stood there alone, breath fogging in the cold. In his gloved hand he held something small and metallic. "I found it," he said. He opened his palm. "My old spare house key." The one I'd given him when Maya was born in 2010 key, the same key Sloane had once used to try my back door. He looked like a boy caught sneaking back home after curfew. "It was in the junk drawer," he continued, "under old batteries and takeout menus. I didn't even remember keeping it." I gestured for him to come in. He stepped into the warmth, set the key on the kitchen table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I slid an index card on toward him, the same one where I'd written, "Oct 21, Maya refused." I handed him a pen. "Add this." I said he wrote in careful block letters. "Deck 20. Key returned." He signed it beneath mine. 2 signatures. A record. When he set the pen down, I could see something break loose behind his eyes. Not guilt exactly, but exhaustion. "She's furious," he said softly. "Sloane. She says you embarrassed her, ruined her reputation with the family." I nodded. "Anger's cheaper than respect. Costs less to feel." He gave a small, sad laugh. "That's probably true." We sat for a while, the silence between us no longer sharp, just heavy with understanding. "You know," he said finally, "when Mom died, I thought the worst part would be losing her voice in the house. But this mess, it made me realize how far we drifted from the way she lived. She never let greed talk louder than grace. That's why we're fixing it now," I said. He nodded, his eyes shining with a mix of shame and gratitude. "I'd like to bring Maya by on Christmas Eve." "Just Coco and talk, no drama," I smiled. "Coco sounds good." He stood to leave, hesitated, then glanced at the hutch, the same one that had held Maureen's necklace for decades. The velvet pouch was gone, replaced by a small photo of Maureen and Maya at the beach, both mid-laugh. "It looks different without it," he said. "It's lighter," I replied. "Because what's supposed to be protected isn't a thing anymore. It's a boundary." Evan took a deep breath, exhaled, and nodded. "You're right, Dad, you always were, but I didn't want to see it." I didn't respond. Some things didn't need saying. They just needed to settle. When he left, I stood at the window, watching him walk down the icy steps, his shoulders straightening a little more with each step. For the first time in years, I saw my son, not the man stuck between two loyalties, but the boy who used to help me fix light fixtures in the garage. After he was gone, I cleaned the kitchen slowly, the way Maureen used to when she wanted to think. I wiped the counter, rinsed the mugs, folded the dish towel 3 times. Then I opened the Seuss folder one last time that day. Inside, the locksmith invoice. The B key return index card and due. The tiny Ziploc bag containing the dummy clasp, labeled and dated. I smiled at that clasp. A little piece of theatre that had caught a liar faster than any argument could. Proof doesn't raise its voice. It just stands still until everyone else runs out of excuses. I shredded old drafts and duplicate prints, extra copies of photos, old statements, anything that no longer had to defend me. The shredder hummed like a small machine of forgiveness. I even tossed the faded treasure-hunting screenshot from Sloane's social media. Some trophies aren't worth keeping. When the trash bag was full, I carried it outside. The wind bit my cheeks, and the lid of the garbage can clattered as I pressed it down. It felt final, clean. Inside, the house was warm again. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and poured a small mug for myself and one for the empty chair across from me. "For you, Mo," I said softly. "We're almost done." The walls didn't answer, but the warmth did. Outside, the world was still cold. Inside, for the first time since that awful birthday, I wasn't, and I knew. The story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about return. December 22nd. The city looked dipped in silver. Snow brushed against the windows like gentle fingers, and for once, Boston felt kind. I spent the morning arranging chairs for the neighbors' holiday dinner, just a small gathering Ruth had insisted I host this year. "You've earned a night with laughter, Hal," she'd said. And maybe she was right. For the first time in months, I wasn't preparing a trap or a defense, just a table. By 6 p.m., the house smelled of cinnamon, roast chicken, and pine. The lights on the little tree blinked lazily, one bulb always slower than the rest. I set an extra plate at the end of the table, the same one Maureen used to sit at. For years I'd avoided doing that, afraid people would call it sentimental. But tonight it felt right. I even placed her old napkin beneath the empty plate, the green shamrock embroidery, faint but still proud. The neighbors came, Ruth, her cousin Eddie, and the retired postman from across the street. We talked about weather, politics, the kind of small things that remind you life keeps moving, even when you've been standing still. For the first time in ages, my laughter didn't sound foreign. We were halfway through dessert when Ruth's doorbell rang next door. I thought nothing of it until I heard a knock at mine. I opened it to find Deshawn from South Street Pawn, bundled in a hoodie, a small envelope in his hand. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. McKenna," he said, a little out of breath. I was walking to my sister's place and saw your lights. Thought I should give this to you." He held up the envelope. "A woman dropped this off at the shop a week ago. Said she found it by mistake. Didn't leave a name. I remembered your story and thought you'd want it." I frowned. "What is it?" He smiled faintly. "A photo. Figured it's better in your hands than in a drawer." I thanked him, offered coffee, but he declined. "Got family waiting." He tipped his cap and left. Footprints fading fast into the snow. Back at the table, I opened the envelope. Inside was a selfie. Sloane's wrist visible, her green puffer sleeve, and behind her the reflection of my hutch mirror. The pendant hung in her hand, the dummy clasp glinting in the flash. The image was cropped too tight to hide what it was. Proof, the final, unnecessary but poetic piece. Ruth leaned over my shoulder. "She sent that." "Someone did," I said. "Maybe Gilt's got a forwarding address after all." The table went quiet. Then Ruth patted my arm. "Frame it," she said with a wink, "so you never forget how close people can get to stealing your peace." I smiled. "No need. It's already framed in memory." After dinner, when everyone left, I sat at the table alone for a while. The house was warm and humming, the kind of warmth that didn't come from radiators, but from closure. I opened the ledger I'd kept since October, the one with every date, every receipt, every word of truth that built my quiet revenge. And on the last page, I wrote a single line: "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." I underlined it twice. The way I'd done months ago with Oct 21, Maya refused. A beginning and an ending on the same sheet of paper. I placed the ledger in the drawer beside the 3 new keys Serrano had made, turned off the light, and let the house breathe. The next morning, December 23rd, snowlight filled the room. I brewed cocoa and set out 2 mugs, one for me, one for Maya, who was due at noon. When she arrived, she was bundled up, cheeks pink from the cold. She hugged me before speaking, something she hadn't done in months. We sat at the table, steam curling between us. I showed her a copy of the Polaroid, the charity receipt, and the letter I'd written about her grandmother's first Christmas. She read silently, smiling through tears. "You really loved her, didn't you?" "Still do," I said. "Love doesn't end, it just changes address." She nodded, tracing the shamrock embroidery on the napkin. "I'll remember that." I looked at her, this girl who'd once called my wife's necklace cheap junk, and saw something new, understanding. "Grandpa," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up on me." I chuckled. "Maureen wouldn't have let me." She laughed, wiped her eyes, and we clinked mugs. Outside, snow fell slow and clean, covering every footprint that had led to this moment, and as I watched her smile, I realized the story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about inheritance, the kind you can't sell or pawn. Justice had walked in daylight. Love had found its way back home, and for the first time in a long, long while, I let the world be quiet.